Over the last few weeks, I've done a ton of videos previewing 2023 rookies, their stories, and their impacts on their future teams. I've had a lot of incredible stories, such as Cody Mock from North Dakota State, or Darnell Washington from Georgia, but the subject of today's video might actually have the better story than those two. His name is Tucker Kraft. He came from a small town in South Dakota, had absolute tragedy hit his family multiple times, and went from 8-man football to one of the top tight end prospects in the country, turned down NIL offers from SEC programs, and is now the next great tight end for the Green Bay Packers. In today's video, we're going to talk about the insane rise of Tucker Kraft, go through his crazy story and career, and talk about why he could save the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, I cannot wait for this one, but before we do, be sure to subscribe if you love college football content, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I could cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the insane rise of Tucker Kraft. Going back in time, Kraft grew up in a small town in South Dakota, and his earliest memories of football involved playing catch with his dad, Doug. He was the ideal teacher of the game, as he was a tremendous athlete himself. He played 3 different sports in high school, and played college football at Huron University. That was an NAIA program 150 miles away, and he became an All-American wide receiver there, setting nearly every record for the program. He was offered a tryout for the Miami Dolphins after he graduated, and that's ridiculous for an NAIA kid. In the Timber Creek area, he was a legend. He played guitar and trumpet, was a volunteer fireman, served on the city council, ran a cattle farm, and became a pilot. Unfortunately, that ended up being costly. On June 6, 2013, Doug was spraying pesticide over a wheat field and lost control of his plane and crashed and was killed. He died of trauma injuries suffered on impact, and he was only 39, and Tucker was 12. After his passing, it was ridiculously difficult. He said, quote, "My father passed in 13, but I became resilient and a stubborn young man. If I believe something is attainable, I'll do what I can do to achieve it because I'm no longer living my life for myself, but for my family, friends, and community." He started to put a lot of time and energy into football and was eventually pretty good at it. He showed immense potential as a freshman in high school, but coming from rural South Dakota, scouts weren't exactly flying in to see him. The town only had about 500 people, and Timber Lake played 9-man football, so there were only 3 linemen. He flat out dominated though. South Dakota State offensive coordinator later said, quote, "It was different. It wasn't just that it was 9-man football, it was literally watching a man amongst boys. He was out there 6'5", 225 pounds, and pretty much everyone else was 5'10" and 160. He was so dominant that Timber Lake's head coach used him at multiple positions. He said, quote, "We had him at tight end and defensive end, and even moved him to quarterback and running back. Except the difficulty would not be over. It was starting to feel like the family was finally coming together after his dad's death, but that peace would soon be interrupted by his mother developing an autoimmune disease. This made breathing difficult for her and resulted in multiple visits to the emergency room. It was really hard on the family, but this is what made Tucker take the next step." He said, quote, "I spent a lot of time alone at my house, and I realized I'm not going to rely on anybody to pay for my college tuition but myself. I knew I was naturally gifted athletically, so I decided I was going to get a scholarship. Originally, I thought I could be a Division II or NAIA basketball player, but after my junior year, I ended up going to some camps, and I was first offered by South Dakota State. In terms of recruiting, he was hidden from FBS programs and eventually accepted the offer to play for South Dakota State. Though he had played mostly running back for the Panthers, South Dakota State saw his size and the way he ran over defenders and envisioned an unstoppable tight end. As I said, he was mostly under the radar at this point in terms of recruiting, but at the last minute, Wyoming would catch wind of him and made him a late scholarship offer. Iowa State also wanted him as a walk-on, and he admits he nearly flipped to Wyoming, but ultimately stayed committed to the school that loved him all along, South Dakota State. He was not ranked on the 24/7 Sports database and was extremely raw going into his career there. So, how would he end up doing? When he ended up getting to South Dakota State, he had redshirt in 2019, right, and was finally ready to be a regular contributor during 2020. But unfortunately, he was slowed due to an injury in their season opener. In 2020, he'd end up playing in 7 games and caught 7 passes, as South Dakota State would reach the national championship. Unfortunately, his performance in the title game and their loss to Sam Houston State was awful. His coach said, quote, "He played awful, the worst game he's ever played, he knew it and didn't try to sugarcoat it. He had multiple drop passes and penalties." With a short turnaround between spring and fall in 2021, South Dakota State granted all their players as much time as they needed to go home or take time off to recharge. While most players went back home, he stayed in Brookings and worked harder than ever before. This would not be the first time a South Dakota State tight end came out of nowhere, as just a few years prior, Dallas Goedert also ended up playing 9-man football before breaking out and becoming a second-round pick in the 2018 draft. Kraft said, quote, "Guys like Dallas paved the way." In 2021, he'd play in all 15 games, finishing with 65 catches for 773 yards and 6 touchdowns. This was an insane breakout season for him, and while the NFL had been on his radar since 2019, he had so much confidence he didn't feel the need to transfer to a Power 5 program. You may be asking where that came from. Well, he got a ton of NIL offers that would have paid him 6 figures. He said he got calls from the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC offering 6 figures in cash and other gifts. So what kept him in South Dakota State? Well, he not only believed he could win a title with the Jacks, but there was also no guarantee he'd have the same role at a blue blood school. If he would have gone to a school like an Auburn or an Ole Miss, he would have been probably a 3rd, 4th, or 5th option instead of the number 1 option with the Jacks. He ended up being convinced that he could be a high draft pick without leaving the FCS, and he also wanted to win a national championship before going pro. In 2022, unfortunately, Kraft would get hurt early on, missing the first month. He would later reemerge in October, though, and finished with 27 catches for 348 yards and 3 touchdowns. It seems like there's a lot of these stories of players who get hurt after coming back, but it wouldn't end up really mattering for him. He helped lead the Jackrabbits to the FCS title, and they'd beat North Dakota State in the championship game. Kraft had 2 catches, and he achieved his lifelong dream of winning a championship, and now he was going to head off to the NFL. He was limited to 9 games, but was still a 3rd-team FCS All-American. He declared for the 2023 NFL Draft, and was a big-time prospect. This year's tight end class was insane, with guys like Luke Musgrave, Darnell Washington, Sam Laporta, Michael Mayer, and Brenton Strange, but Kraft was right there up with them. One scout said, quote, "What makes him different than everybody else in this draft class? A lot of guys produce a lot like him in receiving, but his willingness to block and execute is as good as anyone. And some guys are just out there to catch the balls and block when they have to, but Tucker is a dominant player, and he loves to hit people." He was praised for his size, speed, athleticism, body control, hands, and his blocking, and the only common criticism of Kraft was his route running. His head coach believed that his blocking mindset began in high school and was able to use the benefits of 9-man football and apply it to the traditional game. After a great pro day, he was supposed to be a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick, and hear his name called that Friday night. That is exactly what would end up happening, as the redshirt junior was selected with the 78th overall pick. This was a huge deal for him, and was one of the highest drafted South Dakota State players in school history. They also drafted Luke Musgrave with their 2nd round pick, and those two are going to form an insane duo, and both are already fan favorites. Kraft, though, in particular, is getting a lot of attention for his love for a local food chain. He said, quote, "There really is a Culver's at every Wisconsin exit, and I'm here for it." He's already buying into the Wisconsin mindset. He'll join 2nd round pick Luke Musgrave from Oregon State. One scout said, quote, "They're both all-around tight ends that can kind of do everything. They're not pigeonholed into only being a receiving or a blocking tight end." Personally, I think Kraft has the chance to be one of the next great tight ends in the NFL, and no matter what, he's going to have a long career. With his size and his ability to block, he's at least always going to find himself on a roster, and while he may never be a Travis Kelce or a George Kittle kind of productive tight end, I think he'll be a great player for the Packers, has an insane story, and will succeed at whatever he does in life. His story is extremely inspiring, and I'm excited to watch him on the Packers. But what do you guys think? If you're a South Dakota State or a Packers fan, give me your thoughts on Tucker Kraft, who will be the top receiver for the Packers this season, and what rookie should I cover next? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.